Welcome, everybody. My name is Brad Trimble. I am the Director of Learning and Strategy for the RP Group. I'm very excited to have everyone with me today. We're going to be sharing a tremendous project that's come from the team at Golden West College that's here with us today, titled How to Quiet the Continuous Cycle of Complaints to Amplify a Continuous Cycle of Improvement. So this project was awarded Project of the Year by the RP Group at the RP Conference 2026. So thank you for all of us or everybody that was able to join us at the conference and today for the webinar. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you here, that you came to spend this hour on your hopefully lunch break with us. We are from Golden West. My name is Erin Craig, and we are here to share some things that we have learned over the last couple years centered on AB 1705 math. And really how we've been able to move through, as a math professor, the place where we are just hating AB 705, 1705 to really moving to a cycle of improvement with early indicators and seeing positive change. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce our team that is here presenting with us. We have Dr. Lauren Sasenko, the Dean of IR, and our Community of Practice co-lead with myself. My name is Erin. I'm a full-time math professor. I run the Center for Innovation and Learning here at Golden West College and co-leading this effort with Lauren. We have Jeanette Jaramillo, who is currently our Academic Success Coordinator, our DEIA Committee Tri-Chair, and she's also a former research analyst. And then finally, last but not least, we have Sasha Moore, our English professor. And you might be thinking, English, how is an English professor here for the AB 1705 Math Challenge? But Sasha has been our director of the HSI Title V STEM grant with us. We also have our VPI, Jen Kaufspeak-Getz, that's with us right here. You can see her. We have our department chair, Sean Taylor, with us. And I hope there's other Golden West people who I haven't seen your name, but thank you all for joining us. So at the end of this hour, I'm not going to read these word for word, but you're going to be able to really learn more about how we structured our community of practice here at Golden West. As I said, focused on AB 1705, particularly minimizing the gaps in transfer level math enrollment and success. We're going to talk about some concrete strategies for leveraging resources, and then we're also going to spend some time being very honest and open-handed with you about how did we manage barriers and setbacks and how did we navigate all of that? Because it's true, this work has not been easy, and we are not here to say we have solved the AB 1705 math challenge with these top three things. That's not it. We are here to share what we're doing and some early results, and also hopefully looking forward to learning from some of you as we move forward.
Yeah, so we're going to start off with a warm up. And I want to mention this too. If you joined us live and in person for the RP conference, and we talked about this about a month ago, you got hopefully some great info from us then. But we're still in progress. We had our most recent community of practice meeting on Friday. Well, not our most recent community of practice meeting. We've had an English one since, but our math one. So we're going to have even some extra updated examples for you today. So we really encourage you to let us know what you want to know and to engage with us. We'll also have space for you to engage with us on a Q&A later on in the session. But we'd like to start off by getting to know you a little bit. So we're going to be sharing a poll. Brad's going to help us out with that. And we'd like to know what your role is. What is your role on campus? Are you an administrator, a board member, a classified professional? You can see all of the options there. We'd love for you to take a moment and fill that out so we can just know who is sharing space with us today. And we welcome you all. Everybody who's listed on here is a part of our community of practice, and we are very grateful for everyone's role. So we're happy to have you all here.
All right. Got
Wonderful.
about 70, 80% participation at this point.
Love it. Great. I'm really happy to see a lot of variety in who's here. And also something we're going to be focusing on a lot today is how to call in folks. And so if you are in a role where you feel like, oh my gosh, this sounds really intimidating or really, tough, how am I going to possibly from my role get people involved and engaged? We're going to give you some ideas about how to make that happen. Wonderful. Okay. So we'd love for you to also share in the chat what you're interested in learning from this session today. So we welcome welcome you to pop those notes into the chat. We'll try to work in some conversation around your specific areas of interest as we go. But as I mentioned, we'll also have opportunities for Q&A as you go. If you're like, I'm just here as a voyeur, that's totally okay. If you have specific, we do that too. We love it. We learn a lot that way. If you have specific goals that you're looking to learn from this session, please let us know about that. And also know we're going to be sharing our contact information. So we're here to work with you today, and we're also here and available for you after this session as well. So wonderful. It looks like we've got some folks who are really excited about our title. You don't want to hear those complaints anymore either. We get it. Amazing. Okay, more about the AB 1705 implementation. Wonderful. Okay, good. I'm seeing a lot of good variety also in the chat. I'm including friends of family. That's also also always wonderful too. That's great. So thank you all so much for being here. We are going to, as I mentioned, work in some of this content to our presentation. But if there's anything specific that you're wondering as we're going, don't hesitate to pop that in the chat. We'll be engaging more with that later. Great. Erin, I think you're going to take us into our next space. Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So I want to tell you a little bit about our community of practice story, sort of where we got started. I first came to Golden West College around May of 2023. The college had already been implementing some AB 705 changes, and we're sort of staring down the barrel of AB 1705 implementation. As the Dean of Research, I would go with the researchers on my team. Jeanette was there, and we would present data to audiences like our counselors, math faculty, and some of our administrators. And we'd go and we'd give the report, but there was really, it almost felt like there was sort of a sense of, okay, that's a box checked, but nobody was really felt like they were taking ownership of like, what is this? What does this mean? How do we have to use this information to make change? And so I was like, oh, there's a gap here. There's something we need to do. And it just sort of coincided. Erin identified an EdTrust West recommendation to do communities of practice. And we're like, hey, I think that there's something here. So we identified a team and we went through the EdTrust West workshops to start developing a community of practice, developing a collective data-informed problem of practice. And then we really looked at the student journey to get to math. And we're like, okay, who touches this? Not just like the usual suspects, but who are all the people who might have a role in this? And we strategically invited them to start to be a part of the community of practice and be early members so that we could start to build ownership over what that problem of practice was and really lean into like, this is about improvement. It's not about pointing fingers at people, but it is about owning our outcomes. And there are important gaps that we can't ignore and that we need to start addressing. And how are we going to do that? We also had some key investments on our campus that had happened earlier. So investment in our Center for Innovation and Learning, which is our main professional development hub. So when we were identifying where the errors were, we could then really link it to concrete professional development of how people could improve. We also had a robust data coaching program that we had started a few years before. And we're in, I think, the third cohort, or we're starting the third cohort at this time. So we knew we had some friends, right? Folks who had gone through that training, had recognized how to identify gaps and how to think about starting to address them, who we knew would be in the room with us. Erin, am I missing anything around sort of where we got started?
No, the only thing that I would like to add is like all of these things we were really at like they were converging. And we all know that have been living with AB 705 and 705 with math. It's been exhausting. We've been in this constant state of like writing curriculum, meeting the current phase of the law, and then also like analyzing and figuring out if we're being effective. And so we were at like a critical moment of like we needed to get ready for the STEM pathway, the last iteration of AB 1705 math. The business calculus thing was happening that year. We had had so many different deans over the 5 years with during COVID and 705, all of that, that it was like, this is our moment. We have to act. And what are we going to do? And then we see the Ed Trust West emails and we're like, oh, okay, maybe this is the little nudge that we need to make this happen.
I will also add in the strategic who we're bringing into the room, we did have our leadership there, right? So it was also the decision makers, and our president, Meredith Randall, was there every step of the way, which I think was super important to helping like bring like this is real, and this is something important for our campus, but also like sitting there and talking through problems with other people on from our counseling department, from our math faculty, and so that also was critical. Okay, so this was our this is sort of looking at what did this look like if just thinking about setting something like this up. We, first started really developing that problem of practice, and then we brought people together into the large community practice meeting, and then we vetted it, right? Like we gave them something to start with, but it was not concrete. So there was a lot of iteration or opportunity for iteration so that folks could look at data, look at where we were at, where the gaps were, and then help us refine. Again, trying to build that ownership around this problem of practice and for folks to see their role in the work. Then there's a ton of work. We have the meetings, and then I felt like Erin and I had to do a ton of work to get ready for the next meeting. So we would listen. There's a lot of active listening to the discussions around where are people seeing the pain points. Some of them we needed to like lean in and say, yes, we do recognize that the success rate is very high and we should celebrate that. But that doesn't mean the work is done. And we're going to push you to look at where the gaps are and to think about how we might address them. That got uncomfortable at times. There's a lot of follow-up. Okay, what are the questions that they're bringing to the table or the considerations about why this is happening? Okay, what data do we have that can help answer some of those questions so that it felt like an ongoing conversation and they were contributing to the direction of where that was going. So we do a lot of that inquiry. It included more quantitative data. It included a lot of new data collection, included qualitative data. And it wasn't all just on me. Erin was also doing quite a bit of this lift around what we were collecting data on. And then we'd get the whole group together and just continue to move forward and sort of go through that cycle a few times in the semester. And so we'd have 2 to 3 big, large meetings in each primary term, and that a lot of that work between the big meetings. Again, did I miss anything, team, you want to highlight? Okay, great.
So what are we doing in a specific meeting? We are going through a roller coaster of emotions. We are reminding each other that we've had incredible success. Lauren is always reminding us that we are participating in a continuous cycle of improvement. So we're always thinking about what we just did, what we're doing now, and how that's going to impact what we do next. And that's been really energizing. It's important that we have all of these folks in the room. As you can literally see on the screen right now, our VPI is here in this webinar with us currently. As was mentioned a moment ago, our president, our VPI, our vice president of student services, several of our deans, many faculty, many classified professionals, some of our professional experts on the grant that I manage. These folks are all in the room together, and we are strategically organized so that we are working together. I walked into our meeting on Friday a couple minutes late this last week, and I didn't just walk and sit with my friends. I immediately stopped, asked Erin where I need to go, and she pointed me to my assigned seat. So we're very strategic in how we do things in these meetings. As you can see here, we've got representation from all around. Anybody who might have a hand in supporting students in the work that we are doing together is invited to these meetings, and everybody there has a voice. And again, that's through really strategic organization that Erin and Lauren really think through before these meetings even begin. It's really important to all of us that, this isn't driven by the folks who would usually have the loudest voices. And I can say, as a loud person, some of us do a lot of talking in these spaces. And so it's really important to all of us to be able to connect with each other, to think through issues, and to share perspectives. We all have different roles with our students. And so there are some things that some of us, just by virtue of our roles, completely miss. We really take advantage of our 2-hour sessions, and we have these sessions in person for this particular community of practice. This gives us the opportunity to be heard in a different way. Lauren and Erin are very good spies. They move through the room. They listen to the side conversations that are happening. Sometimes people are really uncomfortable with not mentioning or with mentioning that they don't know a particular term or that they aren't understanding the perspective that we're taking. And so having, these in-person sessions and having them be pretty meaty in length, long enough for us to still be able to focus, but not so long that we're not able to get things done. All of that's really important and has helped us really formulate a, healthy recipe for how these things work. We also really run these meetings as if they are professional development sessions. Because many of us are faculty, we have the lens that we don't want to be lectured to. We try never to do that in our spaces. It's not just about direct instruction. It's not just about presenting the data. We're very focused on creating, as Erin likes to say, the aha moments. So there are a lot of activities that happen in these spaces. For example, in our meeting on Friday, we started with a warm-up. We moved into looking at some data as individuals and then in small groups, talking about how that data could inform efficiency changes on a program that's really fundamental to supporting our students, and then having large group conversations about how that could work in practice and what kind of data we'd like to look at in our future sessions next semester, or we could even pull over the summer to better inform the questions we have and the decisions that we're going to make. So it's all extremely intentional in this space. We also are always looking for improvements, right? So again, in this conversation about efficiency, Jeanette is running our tutoring and learning center. So she presented a huge chunk of the data the other day and really guided us through some conversations about that. We also heard why we needed to have those conversations. Nobody was mandating this, but we're having some changes in our funding. And so we need to look at, is this as effective a program as it could be? Do we need to make some alterations? And because we're so dedicated to the continuous cycle of improvement, even if things weren't changing on the funding front or in some other way, we always want to make sure that we are best serving and supporting our students. So what have we learned this semester or this academic year that maybe changes the way that we want to do things? All of that is what we're looking at and what we're doing in these spaces. How do we do this? Again, we are made to be uncomfortable on purpose, and that's a good thing. We are mixed up in our roles. One of my success coaches was at, I think it was her maybe 6-week mark on the job as a professional expert. And when we came into our community of practice meeting for the first time with her, she was seated immediately next to the president of the college. And she looks at me and says, "Is there anyone in here I should be aware of?" And I said, "Oh, you might want to know, you're sitting next to the president of the college." She goes, "Okay." But her voice was just as important in that group as Meredith's was. And so we really are focused on, again, that mix up, hearing from each other and respecting each other's opinions and views, right? And using that again to support our students and our efforts together. We also are always looking at what's next. We never finish a meeting and go, "Okay, great work, everyone. We resolved every equity gap. We have no problems. Salute." We're out. We're always looking for ways to improve. And something that Lauren does very successfully in every space, but I always notice it in these meetings in particular, Lauren's always asking us, who's not here who should be? I think a lot of people would be scared to ask a question like that when they're running a meeting, right? Because what it shows is there was a gap somewhere. You missed someone. Somebody wasn't invited who should have been. That's never the perspective that we're taking in that space. It's always, how can we improve? Who can engage? Is there anything any of you want to add to this slide?
I just want to answer a question about what kind of data we were looking at. We started with pretty basic data related to enrollment and throughput, disaggregated by race ethnicity. Then we moved to course success, again, disaggregated. Then we started moving into, okay, some of the questions that participants came up with. They asked about course success disaggregated by modality. So this big question about how are students performing online versus in person. We tracked down how students were getting information about which math class to enroll in. So that included some system data about how they were getting through a program called MAP on our campus, but how they're sort of getting that guided self-placement. And then Erin did interviews with our counselors. So how were counselors talking to students about their math placement? Then we also Erin did a syllabi review. Oh, and she's going to get to some of this in just a minute. But those are the types of data that we were looking at in this group. Sorry, Erin, didn't mean to
It's
steal your
okay.
thunder.
No problem. There is enough thunder and lightning for everyone in the world on this topic. So, as Lauren was sharing, we started with a lot of quantitative data. And looking at that, we formed research questions collectively. And just to be very direct, at first we thought we were just looking at challenges or why are students not enrolling in transfer level math, and looking at what's happening or barriers students completing. Okay, so we started, those are the two things. I was going to do counselor interviews and talk to them on their experiences with students, counseling them to enroll in classes, and then also look at the math syllabi. But keep in mind what we talked about. We were under the gun for AB 1705 STEM pathway. Okay, so we had to get all of the courses set up and in the schedule and everything at the same time that this inquiry was happening. So as we were doing that work, and as I was, doing this qualitative inquiry, we were finding Easter eggs coming up in areas that we were not prepared, or I shouldn't say prepared, we were not originally identifying as things to, do inquiry on and shore up. For example, we've had support classes, 6 units, we call them S classes at our college for a couple years before. And we were using the state recommended GPA bands, and we had a hunch maybe we're not getting as many students in these classes. Come to find out, once we really peeled back the layers and worked with the district, we found out that not only our courses at the district level were not originally set up correctly, we had to revamp the entire system as far as the placement, not just at our college, but at our two sister colleges, to get ready for the STEM pathway, because everyone had different validations, everyone had different prereqs that you could and could not recommend. And so we weren't even anticipating that that was really going to be one of the areas where we focused the work, but it resulted in revising the district, the whole placement process and the criteria, and then doing that very collaboratively and swiftly. I did counselor interviews. I interviewed a number of counselors on their experiences with students enrolling or not enrolling in transfer level math. And one of the big things that came out from that experience was a gap potentially in like nudging systems. So if when students apply to Golden West as compared to when they enroll or don't enroll, what do those nudging systems look like? What is being said? How is it being communicated? And what is the sort of follow-up? And then also, as Lauren mentioned, students going through the My Academic Plan, that, the series of questions for them to determine where what math class they would place, that went from a 45 to hour long experience being revised to a 10-minute efficient student experience that is targeted. I also reviewed about 25 math department syllabi from full-time and part-time faculty and found a wide range of policies, some that we won't mention here, but a large opportunity to not just identify that we have policies that are, extremely equity-minded and inclusive, ranging to, whoa, we need to fix this right away. But we started something called Math Reboot as a result of that, of me reporting the findings, everyone analyzing them, instead of me saying, oh no, we need to fix this as a department. We facilitated conversation, pulled that out of everyone, and it was a collective, oh, as a department, we need to shore up these coordinator roles, meaning the full-time faculty that's sort of like shepherding the part-time faculties, and really focus on what we're doing to get this, structured, compliant, and also best practice for students. And then we didn't just look at the gaps. I also did observations of faculty who have consistently closed equity gaps in their in-person classes for the last 5 years. And there were 3 people within the department. And so we were able to do observations or interviews and identify these, we call them signature practices that now we are in. It's not a, and it's a process. We're still doing professional development with the math department to really share what's working, identify opportunities, and not just tell people what to do, bring them along, and also compensate faculty for additional work outside of their duties. And I'm going to say that one more time. Also compensate faculty to have when they do extra, because we get a lot of questions on how do you get people to move. And so we're going to talk about that later, but I just want to be very honest and direct with that part as well.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. So talking about some of the results and impact. Here you can see some enrollment and throughput data for the last 2 academic years, disaggregated by race and ethnicity. You can see in the 2024-25 academic year columns that we do start seeing increases in the enrollment of first-time college students who enroll in transfer level math. And we also see increases in throughput. So we're not saying that our work in the community of practice is a causal relationship, but we are seeing positive changes in enrollment and throughput. This is an example of data that we would review during community of practice, and race and ethnicity disaggregations were always a constant. It was, data that was brought back every meeting. So, like it was referenced earlier, talking about data didn't come without its challenging questions, right? So like when we looked at data like this, we got questions about like, oh, okay, well, math course success rates are high. Shouldn't we be congratulated? Why are we focusing on throughput and these equity gaps? Well, we did have to acknowledge, yes, our success rates are high, but we also want to address these issues. We have to look at these gaps that we're observing, and we have to address them. After this meeting, when this feedback was given, Lauren and Erin did debrief and did acknowledge the successes that we were seeing in future meetings. And they intentionally thought about, okay, how can we do a warm, cold, warm sandwich method with discussing data? And yes, this was acknowledged. Success rates are high, but again, we still have to recognize there's equity gaps and that there will always be something. There will always be a constant context change or student preparation changes or just evolving needs from our students that will require us to have these conversations and really look at continuous improvement. And we also got some questions that could be frustrating about definitions. So definitions like first-time college student, throughput, success were a constant during our meetings. When we reviewed data, there was printouts of those definitions near it. But after a year and a half of community of practice, we still get questions about like, what is throughput? Can we change what throughput means? And it's like, no, we cannot make those changes. We just will make sure to always have the definitions printed and available. And, Lauren and Erin have worked on creating a glossary of terms so people can reference those in the future. And quite frankly, my experience as a research analyst, like I've been a research analyst on this campus before this role for 5 years. And, I received a lot of questions and pushback about data. And from what I've observed, much more pushback than a research dean may get. But I always found it useful to address people's concerns calmly and rationally. And being prepared ahead of time for these meetings has always been helpful. So being very clear on the methods that I used on how I prepared data has always been very handy to have, because if I can't explain something or like percentages don't add up to 100, people will stop listening, and that's not what we want. So it's always really helpful to understand who's in the room, common friction points and questions that may come up so you can have those pocket answers. And it's always really good to have allies in the room, right? who can help you ask critical and reflective questions and just to bring up a different perspective. Lauren and Aaron would tap people before these community practice meetings and like be like, hey, we're going to have this really difficult conversation about this topic. Can you bring up your experience? So doing that prep work before the big group meeting was always helpful. And for us specifically, it was also really helpful to have data coaches in the room, people who have already have experience in looking at data critically and being able to share information and clarify questions with their peers, where it just doesn't really rely just on Aaron and Lauren to like share information and be those facilitators.
Jeanette, can I add just one thing? I just want to share one example of this interaction that I felt like there was a little bit of a breakthrough with some of our participants. And it was when I was presenting data, and it was about the math courses that students were enrolling in based on their program of study. And after the meeting, one of our counselors came to me and like in a hushed voice said, hey, the way that you were talking about that data and presenting it, I think it wasn't quite right. And here's why, XYZ, and going into this. And I was like, why didn't you say something during the meeting? And she says, well, I didn't want, sort of like she didn't want to make me look bad. And I was like, it's okay. Like, please bring this up in the group. If there's something that we should be looking at a different way, we need to explore that. And she's like, oh, okay. And so that the next meeting, we actually brought it back and had her talk about it and her perspective. And I think that was a moment when people are like, oh, okay, this is a different kind of space than they've been used to. Thanks.
All right. So for community practice, it's not just bringing people together into the same room. It really is about the shared leadership. So for IR leadership and instructional leadership. For IR, it was Lauren, and Lauren has access to data, real-time data, to the district research office, to the college president, and she has her professional capital as the dean of research. For the instructional leadership, there was Erin, and she has access to faculty spaces, so the math department meetings, and she has that faculty peer-to-peer connection. So she's also has access to the VPI and to the professional development work through CIL. So having these different relationships and connections and networks with people and this different social and professional capital really complemented each other and helped us move this work forward. We also had a very strong foundation of a campus data culture. So we're currently wrapping up the 4th cohort of a year-long data coaching program. So there were several data coaches in the room who knew about, definitions of throughput, equity gaps, rising tide, and those types of scenarios where they can help people in the room understand that as well. And none of us are in silos. Sasha, she's the HSI grant director. She has access to this funding, and she's an English faculty instructor. Again, that faculty role. Me, I'm a previous researcher, and right now I'm the manager of the Tutoring and Learning Center, and I oversee the academic supports that help contribute to this work. But what has to happen is these connections and the strong foundation of a data culture for these changes to take place. Our campus has tried previous efforts. We have had consultants and external partners that have worked with different departments on our campus, but we haven't seen the change that we're seeing now with this community of practice. We found more success in this, and we believe it's really due to this professional capital and buy-in from the group. Now, as we think about next steps, we're looking at how we can institutionalize effective communities of practice to continue this work not only in the math space, but also other places on our campus.
So we reflected on our community of practice and some of the key areas that we thought were really important in this effort being successful. I've already talked a lot about leader positionality and how I couldn't have done this as the researcher on our campus by myself. And so that partnership with the faculty lead and Erin, and then bringing everybody else sort of along so that they could have their voice in the work was really important. Establishing that problem of practice that EdPress West helped us do, I think also was critical because we could always point back to that. Again, and in an effort of in continuous improvement. So it wasn't about pointing out somebody's deficits. It was about figuring out how to help our students be more successful and what systems or what practices were hindering that. And so figuring out how to empower people to make change. We had to have some difficult conversations at times. And so we knew that was going to happen. And so we had to very strategically navigate that and say it's okay. Like people to disagree, it's okay. But how do we work through it? Was probably the more important part than trying to avoid it. That would have not gotten us where we wanted to go. Erin, is there other things you want to highlight?
Yeah, I can say a few things. And the difficult conversation thing, like for me, like I really like difficult conversations. Not like combative ones, but I love like difficult tension points and collaboratively working through them. But as I mentioned earlier, we were thinking we were just going to focus on why are students not enrolling and why are, all students, the DI gaps existing in success as well. But once we realized, as I said, that issue from the initial course setup, we had to make a choice right then. Are we going to address this? Right? Not focusing on the past, but are we going to commit that we're going to navigate through this sort of messy moment to get to that? For us, it was May 5th, 2025, where all of our courses had to be set up correctly. And so I know sometimes under pressure, like you have to weigh what's urgent, what's important, what's not urgent but important, all of that framework. But we made a decision that if we were going to get this right because we were functioning for a while thinking that we had the course set up right, but finding out it wasn't correct. We're like, okay, no matter what it takes, we are going to work together to get this right for the first time ever. And that's an example of like those difficult conversations. Like, honestly, we managed up as well. Like VPs and presidents have so much on their plate, and there's so many things are urgent and important. And there would be moments during that time where I would say to Jen, we need you to do this to free up this person's schedule to prioritize this. As a math faculty, I might have a strong voice or not be scared of speaking my mind at any moment, but I do not have the power and positionality to say to the scheduler, you need to prioritize this and put that off and this and this. But the VPs did. And having them not just in the meetings, but understanding and being part of us solving these problems, that was critical for us to get it right. And so I just really want to make sure that like that is we could have said like, oh, no big deal. Like, okay, let's just whatever. But we couldn't. Like that wasn't who we were. That would have just contradicted everything. And part of that is like navigating the political frame. It can feel weird to manage other people informally. It can feel weird to like have those like weird, awkward moments. But it's like the student experience at the center, the students at the forefront, it was like, okay, we always were able to return to the North Star because we were not there for like, oh, hey, let's come to these meetings and just look at data. We were sick of that. We were sick of being talked to. We were sick of the AB 1705 beatdown. It was like, how can we construct this in a meaningful way? And it's like the other thing that I really want to point out is like, yes, positionality matters and skill set matters, but also just as important as that is who are the people you need to get to move their thinking, maybe, or their actions, and who can leverage that, who has capital that they can get them to do that. And for me, it so happened that I run the Center for Innovation and Learning. So that PD focus, I'm a reliable professional development resource on campus where if people come to things that we're doing at the CIL, Sasha has a huge hand in that, they know they're going to get a high quality product. And so us like doing this, Lauren and I partnering and doing this, we didn't have to spend the time of like, hey, I promise this is going to be worth it this time. This is going to be good because we have as an institution taken that slow and steady approach. We didn't have professional development on our campus for over 10 years of opening the Center for Innovation of Learning, offering upskilling, the community, building in the cohorts of the data coach. We didn't necessarily know that the data coach cohorts would influence this work at the time. We were training data coaches to get ready for our next cycle of program review. But as we know, urgent, important, AB 1705, right? That year, we're like, oh, how can we capitalize on these skill sets that are, not just because they're math faculty. We had counselor data coaches. We had director data coaches, one of which is in this meeting right now, that it was really critical to have those skill sets sprinkled in the community of practice to get it to work. And it's not just in the community of practice. It's like we have English department data coaches who they're now doing a community of practice. We have the math department chair who did his dissertation on AB 705, and another instructional dean now who's doing her dissertation on the community of practice for the AB 1705 at Golden West College. And so it really has been like a slow and steady approach, I would say, in this area, but sprinkling around or planting these little like seeds, you know what I mean? And then figuring out how we can like cultivate them and then bring them in has resulted in a culture shift on our campus from like, I don't believe in equity to like, how do I do a community of practice? How do I get in on this thing? And the other thing that I want to say, and then Lauren, I promise I'll stop and I'll go back, is when we talk about the faculty compensation, I want to be clear on a couple of things. Is for a faculty to engage in the community of practice, they are not getting compensated for showing up to these meetings to look at the data and to have discussion. That's part of the work. But if there's outside professional development, math reboot happening during the summer or revamp of da 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 da, things that are additional, that are not the work, that is where the compensation and the stipends and the things like that came in. And we were very lucky that Sasha had been running the HSI Title V STEM grant, and the timing of the STEM grant and the scope of the STEM grant aligns to this work. And so we were able to use funding in that frame. And I was compensated for doing the inquiry, to be very direct on this project. And so those are a couple of the small components on that, but I just kind of wanted to dig in a little bit further. And Lauren, take it away from.
No, that sounds great. I think we're good. So I think we are towards the end, and we wanted to leave time today for some discussion or question answers from you all. Does any questions that we haven't answered? Any thoughts about how you might implement something like this on your campus? Okay. I mean, and again, we're still learning and evolving too. So I'm sure there's experience out there. Erin, you have something you want to just bring up?
Yeah, since we got the time. Um, so I didn't share earlier. Oh, here's a question. How did you reach agreement on not compensating faculty for regular COP meetings? That's a good question.
Well, for our full-timers, they have additional time in their contracted time during a primary term that they're expected to be able to attend meetings like this. So that really was being able to make it a priority for them, that this should be one of their requirements. And honestly, Erin's positionality, she's able, that there are a lot who would just come because they want to learn and grow. And there were some that Erin had to pull along. I don't know if you have any more insights into that, Erin.
Yeah, I mean, the full-time faculty, we communicated to them, hey, I mean, I did. We're like, we've been together for so long. We need to care about this. This is our work. This is our house. We've been complaining for however many years that we haven't had the support to really zoom in and attack this. And so this is the moment. So we need you to show up. And the vast majority of full-timers in our department did and continued to show up. It was a very small minority of full-time faculty that either rejected or, and you know what? Like I spent a lot of time, I'll remember during my holiday break in December and January on the phone with some of these individuals, like explaining, listening to them, hearing their concerns, coming to a consensus. I really did put a lot of time on that front. But I also, you learn some people you can move and you can get them, some people you're just not going to. But bottom line is we're moving full steam ahead. And either you're going to come with us and you're going to be part of the changes in this, or we're going to be like dragging you in the trailer, in the back. But in general, and I would say I'm pleased with our engagement in general. I could always come out with counterexamples and part-timers that showed up. Not all of them, but we definitely had part-time engagement. But things that were outside of the schedule, especially the PD and stuff in the summer, like that was clear cut. Like the people would not show up unless they were compensated for outside professional development. But I mean, I do think it was like relationships and sort of peer-to-peer pressure as well. Yeah. Other questions? You could ask anything, or I mean, yeah,
Looks like there's a
Um,
question in the Q&A here. Very
great.
nice presentation. I may have missed this, but but do you envision the community of practice will continue forever or change into something else?
Sure. Lauren, do you want to answer that?
yeah, so um, I think the topics are going to change and we are evolving. Again, like who needs to be in the room, but the inquiry and the opportunity for improvement isn't going to go away. It may change, right? We may tackle math enrollment and throughput, which would be amazing if we were able to completely remove all gaps from now until forever. Um, but then maybe it moves on to another challenge on our campus. So that I don't think will ever change. It's just maybe the focus will change for us.
And I also want to add, it's like because people now like they're like, what's a community of practice? How can I get a? We're now at the point where like, okay, as an institution, we really want and are going to define what does this work look like? What are the components of a community of practice? And because we're finding people want to do it, and so we want to make sure that we like define like what's the difference between a work group and a community of practice? What's the difference between a pilot and a work group and a community of practice? Just because when things get muddy, especially when there's compensation involved too, you don't want people's first taste of a community of practice. Well, I heard you got paid for this stuff and I'm not getting paid. I'm not doing this, So we're just the intentionality on the messaging and things like that is always in our brains. And as we expand and we shift focus, or we're focusing on English community of practice, and there's others in the future, we just want to make sure that whatever our core tenets are, that those are maintained and shifted and, refined as the work continues as well.
It also has to align with our strategic direction and goals of the college, because if we want to be able to connect funding to it, we have to have that alignment. So as those evolve, the community of practice would evolve too.
I'd like to
And
add something that's a little bit touchy-feely because that's my vibe. So it's really important to note too, we get good attendance because what we're doing is meaningful. Recently, I've been attending and looking at a lot of different models of communities of practice and getting involved in others in other places. And I think there's a real space for that sort of catharsis that we all need, especially at this time of year, to be able to sit down and say, this is hard. What is happening? How are we going to fix this? But we have never stopped there. We have always offered a place to be able to have those conversations. And then we are always talking about resolutions and opportunities and funding sources and, innovative ideas and what kind of professional development can we bring in here? We don't just lament what's happened or hold each other in our space, right? We have those moments, but we really are making meaningful experiences for the folks who attend these meetings. And I think that that's important. We get good attendance, not even compensated for the typical meetings that we have for that reason. And as has been alluded to here, the English community of practice is much newer. We started that at the end of last semester, and that has a completely different vibe and a very different focus, but incredible participation already for the same reasons. So I really want to emphasize that. I think when we're looking at the word community, sometimes it feels a little bit too soft. And this is a community with a mission and a focus. And we are on that continuous cycle of improvement endlessly. And that people respond to that. We have seen that in our participation and in the meaningful nature of these meetings. So I just wanted to share that too.
And also, it's like in our community of practice for math, we absolutely have counseling representation, right, as members. But then when we add on the English community of practice and there's counseling representation, they're already informed. They've been engaged in a community of practice of work. It's not like convincing them this is worthy. It's like, oh, a third or half of the people in this meeting now have experience in one of them. So now it's like building the choir and building the choir and building the choir. And we're just really feeling, I would say, those outputs right now more intensely.
All right, we've got another question here in the Q&A. Since you bring up community of practice, can you please provide a definition for it and how to make it a good community of practice instead of a workshop?
For me, a community of practice is ongoing. So it isn't a one-time workshop. It is, you're going to invest, like we invested 18 months into math. Now we're approaching 2 years with math. So it's an ongoing group that we're getting together. It also is about shared ownership. So we're identifying where we have a challenge, but it's not me coming in and saying, this is what it is, and this is what we should do. It is us all coming together to really explore the data and what the challenge is, and from many different lenses. And again, helping to drive the inquiry. So like, what should we be looking at? And so that agenda, it's a little formed before we get in there, but it really isn't cemented until everybody is having that conversation and it's informed by the entire group. So to me, and then it's about having the right people in the room. We can't have that conversation authentically if there are people who are missing from the conversation. So it's about making sure that we have good representation, even when we know that's going to cause friction and going to cause some hard conversations that we have to work through.
And for our experience, I'm not stating this as a definition for the world, right? At our experience at Golden West, it's been a partnership between IR and PD and something else, department, program, something like that. And when we say like the continuous cycle, right? It's like yeah, we talk about who needs to be in the room, but we're also have systems for like there's a note taker in every group. What do they want coming next? We collect those. We also take notes, and it's closing that loop every time. One-off workshops, great. You can pick up a skill, you can leave, you can implement it. One-off PD workshops are wonderful. Okay. This is different because this isn't like a workshop where you learn and then you implement. It's us like dissecting and analyzing and discussing and making meaning of the data that we're digging into, and then coming up with hunches or different places to look or there or that. And then in between those meetings, there's inquiry, there's action, there's things that happen that relate to how, where we were sort of like coming together at the end. And then the next meeting, that's the kickoff. And so if you don't have that, or if that is not intentionally planned and you're listening and you are actually acting on what the outputs and what is said in the prior meeting, you lose trust. They turn into one-off workshops. They turn into, oh, I'm here because, yeah, we're going to look at this and look at our progress. Great. But like, we also like the people we work with too. And like, we don't want to do our people wrong. Like we do not want to ask people to show up at 8:30 on a Friday morning, for 2 hours and have it be a waste. Never. Never, never, never. And so, although we're in the process of like formally defining what that looks like for our campus, I think that these are some of the core tenets that we've, sort of built or, yeah.
Having done quite a bit of community practice work across the state, one definition of community practice that I feel differentiates it from, say, a work group or a committee or something like that is that there's a specific product that the group is focused on producing. So there will be some concrete deliverable at the end of whatever you're working on rather than just having it be a discussion or something like that. That's been helpful for me internalizing what a COP is compared to just other bodies.
Yep.
Well, we're closing in on our hour. I just want to say thank you to the RP group for recognizing us and the opportunity for us to share this experience because it's been a really rewarding one, I think, for our campus. And I feel like we've gotten some momentum with the success of the math community practice that we're so happy to share with folks.
Yeah. And I just put a copy of the slides into the chat for everyone. And we are happy to connect after, or you can reach out to us. Thought partner, our favorite thing to do is learn and share and collaborate. And I'm sure if we chat, we could equally learn something from each of you. Thanks so much for spending your time with us.